It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Yo, how are you guys doing this evening? I hope that you guys are doing well. Let me make sure that I got my fan set right. That's too low. That's too high. And that's just right. Just like what Goldilocks wanted. I have a fan that I use right here. It helps to keep me cool because my air conditioning system sucks in my house. You think I would know someone that could fix that, but you know, one of these days... we'll get to it. But I have a fan that I have like blowing air on me, but at the same time it creates white noise because this microphone will pick up a conversation across my house. I have to set the gain way down to try to not do that, but this white noise really helps that. So I have to make sure that it's set right so that we don't hear people slamming doors and cats meowing and stuff like that. So hopefully you guys are doing well. Steven Montanez, I don't know if I butchered your name there. You ask what I am drinking tonight. Tonight, I am drinking a Pamplemousse LaCroix. It's grapefruit, I think, is what it is. I don't know. These are my my vice right here. These helped me to stop drinking soda. I'm sure that there's bad things that'll come out about these two, considering that they're all put out by all the soda companies that I don't drink soda anymore, but now we drink these carbonated whatever waters and stuff. But what really helped me to stop drinking soda is not even these flavored ones. I started with Costco has sparkly, like Italian sparkling water. It's in like a plastic water bottle. And I started drinking those with just a lime twist in them. And that really helped me to eliminate the soda because what I found was, of course, I was craving the sugar when I used to drink soda a lot, but it was also the bubbles and flavor in general. So when I started drinking the sparkling waters, which essentially is just soda water, right? I just put a twist of lime in there, and then that really helped me to get past the craving for the sodas. And then I slowly went to like the LaCroix and things like that. And like I said, I'm sure that there'll be something bad about these LaCroix. I try not to drink too much when I'm alcohol wise when I'm on call, you know, because obviously you got to be ready for these service calls that come in at any given moment. So couple things I got as usual. I definitely want to get to the chat and cover questions and different things like that. So do me a favor, guys. If you guys do have questions or things that you want me to cover, definitely put them in caps lock. That's all capital letters in the chat. And that'll help me to see them, okay? And remember, there's a lot of stuff going on. Sometimes I miss stuff. If I do, feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. If I miss your question, you can keep reposting your question until myself or one of the moderators tells you to stop. But if I miss it, feel free to send me an email and we'll try to get it onto the next one too, okay? So lots of stuff I want to talk about. I have two very humbling moments that I want to talk about that really put me in my place. But first and foremost, I do have to talk about another YouTube channel, okay? There's another YouTube channel, and forgive me, I do not remember the guy's name, okay? But the channel is called HVAC Time, okay? And it is a great commercial industrial air conditioning channel. You see lots of work on chillers, on large air conditioning systems, and I really do like the way that the guy covers everything. And again, forgive me, I do not know your name and I apologize. I think I did know it at one time, but I forgot it already. But it's called HVAC Time. I'm going to put a link in the chat right now. You guys definitely want to check it out because it's a great channel and he's been doing a great job. And you know, I got to give him props too. I watch his videos and he always like plugs me in his videos, like talking about something he saw in my videos. That's really cool that someone does that because I don't even know the guy, you know, and he watches my videos and talks about my big picture diagnoses approach and stuff like that. So that's really cool and it's really nice. And please, if you guys haven't already, go subscribe to his channel. Great dude. So doing great work on that channel. So, good questions already coming in the chat. So I'm going to mark these ones so that way I can get to them. And I will get to these questions that just came in here in just a minute, okay? First and foremost, I want to talk about something. So I want to talk about these two moments that just really humbled me, okay? The first one was when I talked about in my recent video, the video that I just released yesterday, I talked about pulling up to the restaurant and seeing, you know, police run in there, security run in there, and to walk into the restaurant and see as I'm pulling up, you know, it was really frustrating. And I said this in my video, but I'll cover it here because maybe some people didn't watch it yet. So I pulled up to a restaurant. It was an overtime emergency service call. I was frustrated because I had to go to a service call on a Saturday. I think it was Saturday. And I pulled up to the restaurant. It was at a shopping mall, so I'd already gone to the shopping mall security, got roof clearance, and then I pulled up to the restaurant. And as I pulled up, a police car literally skid in front of me. The police officer was a female. She was out of that car with her door open before the car even stopped. She was running into the restaurant, and I'm like, what is going on? An employee ran out and a customer ran out of the restaurant, and it looked like they were rubbing their eyes. And I was like, you know, like all this stuff starts rushing through my head. What is going on here? I see security coming, and I'm like, what do I do? You know, I got to go into this restaurant, and I don't know what's going on. And as I'm walking up, carrying my tool bag, there's a security officer in front. And I said, I got to go work in there. What's going on? And then she tells me it's a medical emergency. Okay. So then I walk in the restaurant and I couldn't help but look. I felt bad for even looking, but they had a gentleman on the ground. They had an AED on him, a defibrillator. They were trying to restart his heart. They were doing compressions. And it just really put me in my place and humbled me. Okay. I had two of these moments last week. Really, really big moments for me, and it just really made me think, guys. Okay, so I addressed it in my video. I don't think the gentleman made it, and I hope that he did, but I don't think he did from what I heard from management and things like that, but I don't know for sure, so I can't confirm that. But it was a very humbling moment to think that life is very short and we need to make the best of it and live our lives to the fullest, for sure. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now, I want to share this other experience that I haven't shared with anybody but my friends, and I'm going to be completely honest with everybody. I was driving home. I want to say it was Friday. I think it was Friday afternoon. I was driving home from work, and I was sitting in really bad traffic. It was really bad, even for my area. I was kind of like, whoa, what is going on, you know? And I was getting really frustrated because it's the end of the day. I just want to get home. And I had gotten off the freeway because I wanted to get a drink from the gas station. So I pulled into the gas station, got my drink, and then pulled out. And I decided I was going to take some side streets home to try to avoid the traffic mess that there was. So as I'm driving down the side streets, I get far enough to where I think, hey, I might have passed the traffic. Now I'm going to go ahead and get back on the freeway. So I turn down a street, and sure enough, I didn't bypass the traffic. I actually I was trying to get back on the freeway right at the point where they completely had the freeway shut down. And I was like, man, what luck. I didn't miss the traffic, you know? And it took me a minute to realize what was going on. I was in Ontario, California at the moment. And I started seeing police cars, fire trucks. I saw people on the side of the freeway. And then I realized what it was. It was one of the soldiers, one of the 13 soldiers that had been killed tragically in Afghanistan, and they had just flown him home. His name was Lance Corporal Kareem Nikui, and I could be butchering that last name, so I apologize if I am. And they were taking him to his resting place. And that really, really put a knot in my stomach, because here I am, frustrated that I'm sitting in traffic, and I'm frustrated that I'm inconvenienced, and that, you know, I'm not getting home when I want to get home. And this poor kid didn't go home alive. You know, he was being transported home, and it just really made me think, guys. So I had 2 of those moments last week, and it just really puts things into perspective. Makes me really be grateful for everything that I have and my petty problems, because my problems are nothing in comparison to some of the crazy stuff that people have to deal with. So just keep that in mind, guys. And I didn't want to start this on a horrible note, but that one has been really eating at me all week, and I just couldn't help but feeling like the biggest idiot because I was inconvenienced. And then when I realized why I was inconvenienced, boy, did I feel bad about it, you know? So it's just one of those things. Definitely a mess, but let's go ahead and get on with the rest of the stream. Okay. So, Mitchell had asked me a question, in the chat, and he asked a question about the Fieldpiece wireless probes. And he's saying, asking me, are they the right way to go? Okay. And what's the best place to purchase them? Well, anywhere that sells Fieldpiece products is going to be a great place to purchase those, okay? I really do like the Fieldpiece JobLink system in general. It is amazing. There's 2 different ways that you can use the JobLink probes. You can use them with Measure Quick, or you can use them with the actual Fieldpiece app. If you cannot find them at your local supply house, you definitely want to price shop around. I suggest that you buy them locally. If you cannot buy them locally, then you can definitely check out TrueTechTools.com. It is a website that sells HVAC tools, and I actually have an offer code. If you use my offer code Big Picture, you can save 8% on your order as of today. It may change tomorrow, but as of today, you get an 8% discount. And if you know for sure, check out TrueTech, check out the 8% discount. If you like them, shoot me over an email. I can generate you an affiliate link. It'll get me a little bit of an extra commission, and you still get to use the offer code, the discount code, all that stuff. So definitely check it out, okay? Let me see what else we have going on in here. What am I missing? Yeah, definitely. Jason Johnson said, "Rest in peace to our soldiers." And yeah, it was a definite, bummer for sure. So, let me see what else we got going on in this chat right now. Okay. Let's see. Joe T had asked, "What's the most frustrated I have ever been, and how did I deal with it?" There's been lots of moments that I've been frustrated. Of course, it happens. And I'm going to be honest with you, majority of the time that you get frustrated in work usually has to do with the way that you're working and the shortcuts that you take. A lot of the times I create my own frustrations. Now, there's times that I don't. Okay. There's very few, it's rare, but there's times that it's a customer creating a problem. Very recently, I showed it in a video. Actually, it was a walk-in freezer video where I defrosted a walk-in freezer. It was on an overtime service call, like on a Friday night or something, maybe Sunday night. I don't know, but it was during the weekend. And I defrosted a walk-in freezer, and I told the manager, "I think you guys are leaving the door open." No, we're not. No, we're not. And I have it on video. I came back the next morning to follow up on the box and do some more work. And I walked in the door, and the door had been left open from what looks like the night before when I was just there defrosting it. And it was just like a big slap in the face because, I just went through all that work, and then here I am again, and I got to go through it again. And then why did I come out yesterday? It's one of those things. I'm thankful for the work, but I still am frustrated at times. Okay. So there's lots of moments that I get frustrated. That's one that comes off the top of my head at the moment. So, and then there was another question in here. Heavy metal guitarist, you said how much product is too much product in a walk-in freezer? Well, of course, you need your evaporator to have proper airflow. In a perfect world, you want 12 inches, about 12 inches of clearance on all sides of the evaporator, underneath it, behind it, on the sides of it, so that way the air can pull underneath the evaporator, blow back out of the evaporator, and then you want complete clearance all the way to the other side of the box. That way the air can travel and then come back. You know, that's a perfect situation. Doesn't always work that way. A lot of times the customers jam stuff all around there. It hinders airflow, adds to the freeze up issues and different things like that. But in a perfect world, about 12 inches of clearance around all sides of the evaporator would be perfect. So, all right, we're going to mark that one off the list. Talked about that. Ooh, this is a really good question. So Jonathan, he's actually one of my Patreon patrons, right? So he chose to donate to the channel through Patreon. And Jonathan asked a really good question through Patreon, okay? He said, why are some refrigerant cylinders, or why do some refrigerant cylinders have less refrigerant than other refrigerant cylinders? And he was comparing R22 to 410A. If you have a 410A refrigerant cylinder, typically it has about 25 pounds. That's for a typical 30-pound normal cylinder of refrigerant will actually only have 25 pounds of refrigerant in it. If you have R22, you will get a true 30 pounds of refrigerant in that cylinder. So he was just kind of curious why there's a discrepancy between the different refrigerants and what's the reason for that. And the reason for that is based off of the pressure-temperature relationship of each one of those refrigerants. Now, I'm going to give you the easiest way to understand this, and this is what I told Jonathan. The easiest way, this isn't the scientific reason, because 410A has higher pressures than R22, it's going to have less refrigerant in the cylinder because you need room for that refrigerant to expand. Okay, now you can get all scientific and talk about the pressure-temperature relationship and, you know, get crazy looking at pressure-temperature charts. But essentially, you don't want to overfill a cylinder. You always want to have room for expansion. When the pressure or when the temperature outside goes up, or the temperature of the space at which the refrigerant cylinder is being stored goes up, the temperature around it, the pressure in that cylinder goes up too. And you have to have room for expansion. You have to have room for that pressure to move. And if you filled that cylinder 100% of the way with refrigerant and sealed it off, you would have a catastrophic explosion of that cylinder. Not necessarily a fireball explosion, but the pressure in the cylinder would make the cylinder rupture, okay? So that's why we don't want to overfill the cylinders. And the same thing goes when we're dealing with recovery cylinders, okay? You never want to overfill recovery cylinders. Just because you have what we call a 30-pound recovery cylinder, in all actuality, a 30-pound recovery cylinder only has room for 26 pounds of water in it. Okay, that's the water column is typically 26 pounds. So if that cylinder was filled up all the way with water, it would be 26 pounds. So we use the term 30-pound refrigerant cylinder, but it's not true. That's more of a nominal number, okay? So for every different refrigerant, you're going to have a different pressure-temperature relationship and therefore a different amount of refrigerant you can put in that cylinder. When it comes to recovery cylinders, you want to look at the water column weight, the tare weight, and the refrigerant temperature relationship. Look at your pressure temperature chart to figure out how much refrigerant should be in there. Now, my buddy Brian has a really cool app on the HVAC School app. You guys can download it from the App Store. It's free. And he has a recovery cylinder calculator that will tell you, you input the numbers and it does the math for you and tells you how much refrigerant you can put in there. And it's all going to change based off of the temperatures at which the cylinder is being stored in, okay? So for our standard refrigerant cylinders that, you know, we just buy from the supply house, they're always going to have different amounts of refrigerant based off of the pressure-temperature relationship, okay? So hopefully that answers your question, Jonathan. Let me cross that one off the list, and let me get to the chat and see what we got going on in the chat. I see a lot of stuff going in there, okay? Let me see. Looking forward to your merch, Tarpley's Appliance Repair. Thanks so much for the support. If you guys don't already know, if anybody is interested, it sounds like Tarpley's Appliance Repair possibly purchased something from my website too, hvacrvideos.com. We have hats available, shirts available. It's just a cool way to support the channel. I try not to step on the product too much. I try not to mark it up too much. I just have a small little amount that I like to make off of each shirt. Usually I typically, I mean, sometimes it differs depending on where it's going, but typically off of each merch item, I just try to make $5 off of it. Sometimes it might be $6 depending on some things, but I try not to stomp on everything too much. It's not really something that, you know, I want to like get rich off of or anything like that. I just, you know, obviously we got to break even, make a couple bucks past that. So that's what we do. But yeah, if you guys are interested, hvacrvideos.com, you can definitely go to the website. My wife handles all the merch orders. Actually, there's one sitting right here that we need to send out, and then we just sent a bunch out today. So thank you guys so very much for all the support if you've already done so. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the chat. If I passed your guys' questions, feel free to repost them, guys. I'm seeing a lot, but I just can't get to them all. So just keep reposting them and I'll try to get to it, okay? Scott asks, what are some of the common reasons leaks develop? Okay, that's a great question, and that's actually going to segue into another thing that I want to talk about too. There's a bunch of different reasons that leaks develop. In my opinion, the most common reason that I see refrigerant leaks is because of corrosion, okay? I deal with restaurants, and restaurants, we have refrigerators and walk-in coolers where we store lots of products, and oftentimes those products are not properly covered and not properly sealed, and there's contaminants coming from the products. Anything that has citrus in it, it'll have citric acid in it, oranges, lemons, all that stuff, right? Or any salad dressings that have citric acid in them or vinegars in them, okay? They will become airborne. The chemicals or the citric acid or vinegars become airborne, and it attacks the copper and start to deteriorate the copper. The easiest way to think about that is if you guys pull out a penny out of your pocket and look at a penny. A penny is mostly copper, right? And it has a copper color to it, okay? If you didn't already know this, the Statue of Liberty is made out of copper, okay? But you notice that the Statue of Liberty is green, okay? That green color is actually the corrosion attacking the copper and slowly deteriorating the copper. The same thing happens in an evaporator coil is the airborne contaminants attack the copper and typically cause refrigerant leaks. That's one of the most common reasons that I see refrigerant leaks. Now, one of the other reasons that we see refrigerant leaks is proper or improper brazing practices, okay? If you don't properly clean the pipe before you braze it, okay? What you typically want to do is you take a piece of copper, you're gonna braze it together, right? You want to have that piece of copper cleaned on the inside and the outside. Now, I know a lot of people say you don't need to clean the outside of a joint. Even some people say you don't ever need to clean a joint. Just heat it up and it'll be fine. But that is not true. You need to clean the joints, okay? Cleanliness is king when it comes to brazing, soldering, anything like that. You need to have a clean, I mean, even just standard welding, you need to have a clean surface for the process to happen, whether it be brazing using filler metals to bond two pieces of metal together, whether it be actual welding, soldering, you always want to have a clean work surface, okay? So properly cleaning the pipes, if you're using silver solder, like 56% silver solder, then you need to have a flux. If you're using like a tin solder and you're soldering stuff together for like copper pipes for plumbing, then you need to have a flux on that too, okay? There's really no need to use a flux if you are using 15% brazing rods, the Silphos brazing rods, because the phosphorus in there actually acts as a flux. So there's really no need to add a flux to that. I know some people love to do that. I don't think it necessarily hurts anything, but I don't. But it's all about cleaning everything. So someone had asked me a question about brazing tips. And what I wanted to say about that, he asked me if I had any tips on brazing and cleanliness, man. Clean everything. Deburr the pipe. Make sure you get a good fit. Make sure the pipe fits as far into the joint as possible. And then make sure that you're heating and applying the solder properly, okay? That's the best thing when it comes to brazing, and brazing is another common cause of refrigerant leaks because people aren't brazing properly, okay? So you definitely want to clean the work surfaces and make sure that you have a good bond of the two metals using the filler metal when you're brazing. Let's see. Have I seen or used a wireless thermostat that doesn't have thermostat wires? Well, there's always going to be a place where there's going to be thermostat wires. If it's a wireless thermostat, what it's typically going to have is it's going to have a module somewhere where the thermostat wires connect to the module, and then the module to the actual human interface might be wireless, okay? Honeywell makes them, which is now Residio. They have the Red Link system. It uses a proprietary communication, whatever. It's probably Bluetooth or something like that. Yes, I have used it. It works in some situations, but if you have a high noise environment, as far as like electrical noise and stuff, it can be a problem using wireless connections, especially if you're using a Bluetooth connection. So you want to look at whatever their wireless protocol is, what type of a system it is, because if it's like standard Bluetooth that they're using, then if you use that in a place that has a lot of other Bluetooth devices, you could see interference and different things like that. So, Kyle B, thank you so very much for that super chat. Kyle says, is it okay to pull a vacuum on a scroll compressor? You've heard different things. Okay, Kyle, what you are referring to is pulling a scroll compressor into a vacuum while it is running. That is not good. Okay, that is very bad, and you do not want to do that. But doing a proper evacuation on the system to dehydrate the system before you put refrigerant in it, that is perfectly fine and safe, so long as the compressor is not running while that evacuation is happening. So there's two things going on there. If you have a system that does a pump down, okay, where solenoid valves might close but the compressor keeps running, you have a low pressure control that turns the compressor off when it gets to a certain pressure. Then in that situation, you want to make sure the pressure control is set appropriately, because you do not want that compressor pulling into a vacuum while it is running, okay? But even furthermore, you do not want the compressor starting while it is in a vacuum. That can be problematic and cause issues within the compressor. So I think that's what you were alluding to, but pulling a evacuation to dehydrate the system of any gases and or moisture or non-condensables before we're going to charge it with refrigerant, that is perfectly fine and safe. In fact, you need to do that, because if you don't pull a proper evacuation, you will have issues later on down the line, which could lead to a failed compressor. Okay, so hopefully I answered your question, Kyle, and thank you so very much for that super chat, bud. Metalhead691 asked inside the chat as the live stream was starting, he said, can I briefly talk about capillary tube cutters? And yeah, that's a great thing I'd love to talk about. So if you do a lot of work with capillary tubes, especially in the mid 2000s, capillary tubes were on everything. It's a type of metering device. It's essentially a long orifice that creates a set restriction that allows the refrigerant to flow through it at the right rate. They have to be sized appropriately. But oftentimes capillary tubes can get plugged up and or they can develop leaks, and you might have to replace the capillary tube, which is the metering device, right? So how do I go about cutting a capillary tube? So if you go to the supply house, they'll actually have a tool called a capillary tube cutter. And it looks basically like a fancy pair of wire cutters, and it has a small little opening, and it supposedly crimps the cap tube perfectly, cuts it, and does not restrict it when it cuts it. Now, I'm going to argue with that. You can clearly see a difference if you cut a capillary tube with a cap tube cutter versus the way that I do it. The way that I do it, you can see. Now, it may be marginal what actually is happening, but I can clearly see a difference the way that I cut a capillary tube. And I'm going to tell you how. I have had capillary tube cutters in the past, and I realized when I was looking at a capillary tube cutter, I'm like, why do I have this? I already have something that I can use as a capillary tube cutter, and I don't need to buy an extra tool. You have wire strippers in your tool bag, right? Almost every HVAC technician, HVACR technician is going to have a set of wire strippers. Grab that set of wire strippers. Do not cut the capillary tube. You're just going to score the capillary tube. Now, the old school guys are going to be like, yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. Score the cap tube, then break it. That's exactly what I'm going to do with wire strippers. You can do it with a cap tube cutter, but it is not going to be a one-time cut. All I'm going to do is take the wire stripper, put it over the capillary tube where I want to cut it, and I'm going to apply gentle pressure. I'm not going to cut the cap tube all the way, and I'm going to spin the wire strippers on the capillary tube a couple times until it scores the cap tube but doesn't go all the way through. Then once it's scored and you see, a little bit come off, you'll see a little ridge right there. You just take that cap tube and bend it, and it should snap right off. If it doesn't snap off on the first bend, then you need to score it a little bit more, and then it'll snap right off. Then what I want you to do is take the piece of the capillary tube that you're not going to use, and I want you to take a capillary tube cutter and just cut it. And compare the opening of the piece that I scored with my wire strippers to the opening of the piece that you cut with the capillary tube, and you will see a rather large difference. You will find that scoring a cap tube, then snapping it off, is a much better way to cut a capillary tube instead of using a one-time cut on a capillary tube cutter. So that's how I cut capillary tubes. Now, what I will tell you is oftentimes on systems, you will find that capillary tubes, when the manufacturer installs them, they're going to be wound up in a nice little spool and it looks really cool. But then you get yours and it's in this giant big roll and you're like, what do I do? Capillary tubes are very resilient. So just find something round, whether it be a soda can. Now, old school, I'm going to date myself. What we would use to roll up a capillary tube was a mag light flashlight, because we used to carry a 3D or a 2-cell D mag flashlight in my van, right, in my tool bucket at the time. And I would take that mag light, and I would roll the capillary tube around it because it was the perfect diameter. And then you would get a nice tight roll. It would be perfect. And that's how I would do it. Nowadays, I don't carry a mag light flashlight anymore. You can just grab, anything round. Usually you can find something round in the kitchen and just wrap the capillary tubes around it. You'll get a nice clean roll, and then you can shove it in wherever you need to go. So hopefully that answers your question about cutting the capillary tubes, bud. All right, let me see what else we got going on in here. 716 Appliance Guy, see you later, bud. Thanks for coming in here, man. All right, let me see what else we got going on. What am I missing? Sans Comic, thanks so much for that super chat, man. Have I played Delta Rune Channel 2 yet? No. Don't know what that is. I'm assuming that's a game, but I don't really play games, computer games or anything. So no, I have not played that. But thank you very much for that super chat, bud. Let's see. What am I missing? I'm missing all kinds of stuff in here. What did I miss here? All right. R290 is flammable gasket. Proper training before trying to work with it. Howard Sharp. That's a statement. I'm assuming he's talking to someone else. But yeah, you definitely want to understand the potential negative consequences of working with R290. You need to follow proper refrigeration practices, but then on top of that, there's a few other practices that you need to follow, such as purging the system and sweeping it with nitrogen before you even cut into the system, to make sure, or to do your best to remove flammable gas pockets that could be left in the system. You typically don't want to try to unsweat dryers or anything like that. I mean, sometimes you have to, but you just need to be aware of your surroundings, be in a well-ventilated area, just know what you're doing. If you're going to try to purge the system or sweep it with nitrogen before you braze or anything like that, keep in mind the systems oftentimes will have solenoid valves and or restrictions in them because of metering devices and different things like that. So you need to make sure that you have a full flow through the system before you try to pressurize it or sweep it with nitrogen. So let me see what else we got going on in the chat. Remember, if I'm missing stuff, definitely. Jason Johnson, you have a cap tube cutter. That's cool. Try what I said. Try it next time. Just take wire strippers and score it. You can even score it with a cap tube cutter too, but just try scoring it next time you do it and compare it to the cap tube cutter, and you will see a difference, a noticeable difference. Whether or not that difference makes a pressure difference or a restriction, I don't know, but I can clearly see a difference with my eyeballs. See what else we got in here. The only dumb question is the one not asked, and that is very true, Jason Johnson. All right. What happens if you don't purge with nitrogen while brazing? Heard mixed answers. Joshua, what can happen is you can get, I'm not going to get super technical because I don't remember half the technical terms, but essentially you're going to get, I think, carbon buildup inside the lines. So just take a 7/8, you can experiment on this. Just take a 7/8 inch piece of copper and just take the torch and just heat it up to the point that solder will flow on it. Just have it open 12 inches, something like that, open on each end, and just look at the amount of black, like carbon type substance that builds up inside the pipe. And it's because of the oxygen and some kind of chemical reaction that happens with the heat and whatever. I don't know. It's some voodoo magic stuff. If you sweep the system and then purge it with nitrogen while you're brazing, you will actually notice that you do not get that black carbon buildup. That black carbon, whatever stuff that is, will start to restrict liquid line filter dryers. Now, I will tell you, I went to go do a warranty job for a customer, that a manufacturer that called me out to a college, a local college of mine, and they had a new campus built, like this huge facility, and they had refrigeration equipment. They had a giant parallel rack on the roof. Parallel meaning they had multiple compressors. I think it had 3 scroll compressors, piped in parallel, and they basically all ran off of different pressures. They had pressure controls, and when the load or the demand of the system went high, you know, more compressors would turn on. It had walk-in coolers, and maybe, if I had to guess, 20 different reach-in coolers, maybe a couple different walk-in coolers on it. So it was a big system. Hot gas bypass, all that fancy stuff. So what I found was the manufacturer called me out. They had a bunch of reach-in refrigerators that weren't working properly. And I found there was, like, I don't know, I think maybe 6 of them that all had restricted expansion valves, every one of them. And I'm like, what the heck, you know? So I pull out the expansion valves, and I cut the expansion valves out, and I disassemble the expansion valves. And what I actually found was they were all restricted with, like, the carbon flakes from someone not brazing with nitrogen. Okay. So what we had to do, and in order to do this too, they had no isolation valves installed on any of the reach-in coolers. And mind you, this was a big giant system. So I had to pump down the entire rack, right? The entire system, all the walk-ins and everything. I had to pump it down. I had to install isolation valves on each refrigeration unit. I think it was 6 or something like that. So suction and liquid isolation valves on every single one. And then what I had to do was, after I installed those isolation valves, I had to change the core dryer on the roof, right? So we had a big core dryer. We changed that out, and we were pulling handfuls of carbon flakes out of that dryer from new installation because they did not purge with nitrogen. And then every expansion valve in all my systems was bad because they were restricted. And it was all because on this big installation, they were not purging with nitrogen. They must not have swept the system. I mean, even if they didn't purge with nitrogen, they could have at least swept the system. There's things they could have done, and it was a mess. And we ended up having to shut down the entire facility just to pump it down to do all this work. Now, once I pumped it down, even after I installed isolation valves, I changed the expansion valves, changed the dryer on the roof. We had to come back like 3 times for different units because the expansion valves kept clogging up. And in that situation, we actually had to install liquid line filter dryers at every single reach-in. So they had redundant filter dryers all throughout the system. And I was all worried about pressure drop and stuff. But at that point, the manufacturer was done. They were like, we're not warranting any of this stuff anymore. And I was working for the manufacturer. So I was like, well, you guys got to pay me. I'm not here to work for the customer, you know? So it was a mess, and it was all because they did not braze with nitrogen while starting up that system, and they didn't properly purge it, and it was just a mess. So you definitely want to try to purge as much as possible, but let's be practical, and I do say it in my videos often. Sometimes I can't. Sometimes in weird situations, in a pump down or something like that, it's not very practical, and you can't always purge with nitrogen. So sometimes you have to do what you have to do. But when you're doing big installations like they did on this system, it was a huge system. You know, there's a mile of pipe or whatever it is. Yeah, you need to purge because you're going to have a lot of carbon buildup in that system for sure. And at a minimum, the person who installed it should have put isolation valves on everything, so that way we could have at least isolated every system. It was a mess. All right, let me see what else we got going on in here. When is it okay to use StayBright 8? You see a YouTuber use it on 410A systems, Richard Burton. Hey, you know what? I hear a lot of people that talk about StayBright 8. To be fair, StayBright 8 is a brand specific name, okay? It is a low temperature solder. There's a couple different manufacturers that make this brand or this type of solder, but it has a low melting point. And the theory is that if you use a low temperature solder, that you possibly won't have to use nitrogen to braze the system in, and or you don't have to get the components as hot to make the solder bond to the two metals, okay? But when you do use some of these low temperature solders, you typically do have to use a fluxing agent. It's very similar to a tin-based solder that you would use on plumbing systems, okay? So I currently don't use any low temperature solders such as StayBright 8 or any of the other ones. I personally don't care for them simply because I fixed a lot of leaks on low temperature solder, and I don't have to fix very many leaks when I use 15% Silphos or 56% silver solder. Those are the only 2 solders I use when I'm doing refrigeration piping. 56% is for dissimilar metals. If I'm doing copper to brass, stainless to copper, I will use when you have dissimilar metals, 2 different types of metals, and you need to bond them together, we will use 56% silver solder. And then if we have copper to copper connections, we're going to use 15% silver solder. That's how I roll. I've just fixed too many leaks on the low temperature ones. And then one of the problems I run into with low temperature solders is When you go to fix a leak later on it, what do you put on it if you don't have that same low temperature solder? Do you try to mix silver solder in there? I haven't had very good luck in the long term of getting silver solder to mix properly with the low temp solders. It's just a headache because I don't carry those low temperature solders. So I try to stay away from them as much as possible, but that's just my personal preference. Some people swear by them. Some people love them. I see people on social media that say that's all they've used. I see people on social media saying everybody's a hack that doesn't use it. You know, I'm not going to pass judgment on people. I just do what I want to do, you know? So it is what it is. Let's see what else we got going in here. Yeah, if you guys have questions, you definitely want to put them in caps lock. That way I can see them, okay? Purging with too much pressure with nitrogen is bad. Yes, it is. Because if you purge with too much pressure, you can actually cause the solder to bubble out. So you definitely want to purge with a very, very low pressure. Typically, I'm trying to think of the flow rate. I can't even think of the flow rate. Is it 3 FCS? There's a term that you're supposed to use. What I actually use is the Western Enterprises VN 500 regulator, and it has a braze setting on it that just flows the nitrogen just at a very, very small flow rate, and it works perfect for brazing when I'm pushing nitrogen through the system. But you definitely don't want to have too much in there. When you are purging with nitrogen, when you're brazing, you need to make sure you have an exit point for the nitrogen. Hence what I showed in my ice machine video not too long ago, where I was unsweating a dryer and I had someone hook up the nitrogen, but my fault. I didn't tell them to take the low side hose off, so that way it gave a place for the nitrogen to escape, and then it blew the dryer out. You know, there's like a little whoof explosion kind of a thing. Nothing bad, but it just popped and scared the crap out of me. So, all right. You haven't yet, but do I use silver on TXVs? No, I don't use silver solder on a TXV unless it's typically like the Sporlan TXVs and even other brands of TXVs, they will often be copper-coated brass or copper-coated steel. Even on some of the Danfoss, because Danfoss is notorious for using stainless steel TXVs, but they actually have a copper coating on them. So there's a little bit of a different process, but majority of the time you don't have to use silver solder. You can actually use just standard 15% sulfos. So you just need to look at the type of the metals. If you have two dissimilar metals, then you have to use, and it doesn't have a copper coating, then you have to use, silver solder basically. So, all right, let's see what else we got going on here. How often do I install twist timers like in my recent video? We have a lot of walk-in freezers with twist timers, so it's a very common thing that we do. What I typically do is what I wanted to talk about, because someone had actually asked me this question, so let me find it on here. Right here. Oh, I don't have the person's name, but the question was, why don't I just install a door switch on the walk-in freezers instead of a twist timer? I haven't had very good experience with door switches. Okay. Let's start this out. I'm dealing with typical walk-in freezers. I typically don't have a low voltage control circuit. I'm usually dealing with high voltage, 208 volts, running through the switches. So if I'm going to use a door switch, you want it typically to be on a pump down circuit, so that way when the door opens, it goes to a pump down. But I would find that I have had some systems that have door switches on them, and I find a lot of nuisance service calls on those door switches where the customers still leave them open. And then what'll happen is oftentimes on the evaporator coils that have logic, they'll typically have a circuit board inside of them. If they have a door switch interlock built into the logic board, they will oftentimes have the system shut off, but then after so much time of it being open, it will default to normal operation, assuming that the door switch is bad. So it'll start back up and start running even if the door is wide open. So they do that because they're assuming that maybe the door switch had failed or something. It's just, so I don't really use door switches because I'm typically not running low voltage for my control circuit. If I was, maybe, I don't know. I just really don't like the door switches too much because of all the nuisance problems I've seen with them. I prefer a twist timer. I have a much lower failure rate than what I see on door switches, but I don't work with door switches a lot. So I'm also just not very familiar with them. I've only seen them a few times, but I have seen a few failures on them. So is there a chart for sizing R290 capillary tubes? I have not seen an aftermarket chart, Randy, on R290 capillary tubes. And I'm going to tell you right now, you don't want to use an aftermarket R290, you don't want to try to cut your own capillary tube or anything like that. For liability reasons, I'm going to strongly advise you that if you're changing a component on a system that has R290 in it, take the liability out of your hands and only use OEM parts. I know that's a pain. I know it sucks. But I would highly suggest that you not try to field modify anything, trying to make your own capillary tubes or anything like that, because if there ever was a failure that turned catastrophic with that R290 cooler, you don't want to be on the losing side of that. And the manufacturers typically have better lawyers than all of us. So I can guarantee you if they find aftermarket components or things that aren't factory on that, they're going to try to push the blame onto the contractor that installed the aftermarket components. So I would highly suggest that you only go OEM. So to answer your thing though, I have not seen any aftermarket charts on R290 stuff yet. So I really don't have an answer on whether or not they have a chart. Harry had asked me a question through email about setting pressure controls for pump down systems, and he wanted to know if I could make a video on that. There's a possibility. You know, I typically don't go with a video in mind and start filming. I typically just go and just film whatever happens, okay? So Harry, there's a very good possibility that I will get an opportunity to discuss setting pressure controls. I will cover a little bit on here. The first thing you want to understand is you need to have a pressure temperature chart. Now you guys can kind of see the tail end. I have a big giant pressure temperature chart right here, and I can see that. You want to understand the pressure temperature relationship of that refrigerant. First and foremost, a pump down system is a system that a solenoid valve closes and the refrigerant levels continue to pump until on the suction side it gets lower and lower and lower, because typically the pump down solenoid is installed on the liquid line and it shuts off the flow of refrigerant, and the compressor runs until it gets to a certain level, then the compressor turns off. What setting do we set that pressure control at? There's a couple different methods you need to, or things you need to consider when you're setting a pressure control. First and foremost, you want to lean on the manufacturer of the compressor and find out what they recommend as far as pump down settings for that compressor. If you're dealing with a scroll compressors don't like to pump down past 5 psi, sometimes even 10 psi. So they don't like that, because what you will find is if you try to pump down a scroll compressor and you get it down to 5 psi, when you turn it off, all of a sudden you'll hear a sound, and the compressor's pressure internally will relieve itself and it'll equalize out to where the pressure rises, and then the compressor will turn on again, and then it'll pump down to 5 and then turns off and it rises again, and it's short cycling on, off, on, off, on, off. And I have seen that cause catastrophic compressor failures because the compressor's running, it's overheating, doesn't have proper oil return, and it will burn itself out over time. So how do we know where to set that pressure? First and foremost, you want to lean on the manufacturer. Next thing you want to understand is what you're trying to do with the system, okay? What temperatures are you trying to maintain? You typically, so whatever you set your cut out pressure at, the pressure at which the compressor turns off, you have to consider what you're going to set your cut in pressure at too. So you want to lean on the manufacturer to find out what they recommend the cut out pressure be for that compressor. But then when it comes time to setting the cut in pressure, you have to consider what ambient it's going to be outside if the condensing unit's sitting outside, what ambient it's going to be inside the box because of a pressure temperature relationship. If it's 40 degrees outside and you're trying to maintain 40 degrees in the box, well, the pressure in the system is only when it turns on is going to be driven by that outdoor ambient pressure, or temperature. That outdoor ambient temperature is going to warm up the refrigerant in the condenser, and when the solenoid valve opens, that temperature is going to make the refrigerant be at a certain pressure, and it's going to push it through the system. So you have to keep that in mind. So you look at a pressure chart and you find out that for 404A, 40 degree ambient, let's see, at 40 degree ambient, 404A looks like, if I'm looking at my pressure chart, it's at about 85 psi at 40 degree ambient. So you want to make sure that your cut in pressure, right, is no higher. Is it no higher? Or am I twisting myself up? Now, I'm going to have to wait for the video, because that way I can think about this, because sometimes I mumble on my words. But you want to pay attention to the ambient temperatures and the temperature inside the space. That way you don't mess yourself up by not having enough ambient temperature outside to drive that refrigerant pressure through the system. Okay, so keep that in mind and stay tuned. I'll try to make a video where I actually make it all make sense. I'm sure I just confused everybody with what I was just talking about. So, guys, in my recent video on the walk-in cooler that wasn't working, where I had to fix 7 leaks between the 2 evaporator coils, I had a bunch of people that reached out to me that said, hey, when I was brazing, they saw the lines move. And I did see that while I was brazing. So what had happened was the lines were not necessarily, they were kind of at a bind. And as I was brazing or heating them up to braze on them, they kind of flexed, and some of them popped out, some of them pushed in, different things like that. But I did notice that when I was doing it, but I didn't really see anything bad about what was happening. It wasn't concerning me. They kind of flexed a little bit and moved a little bit, but they were still in the fittings enough that it wasn't a concern to me. But keep that in mind. I was just talking with my apprentice today about brazing, because we were soldering some water lines, and I kind of burnt myself with a MAP gas torch. You can't even really see it, but there's a tiny little blister right there. And I was just having a discussion with my apprentice, because, we're getting ready to start brazing and doing that kind of stuff and letting him get his hands wet with all that stuff. And I just told him, I said, there's instances that you have to learn how to not react in certain situations. So we were soldering some drain lines together today, and I accidentally waved the MAP gas torch across my wrist, and it burnt my hair off and gave me a little blister. Life happens, but it's learning how not to react in a bad way when that kind of stuff happens. Because what happens if you're brazing in a compressor when a condenser fan motor is running above your head, and you burn yourself and you jam your hand into the condenser fan motor? Or I'll give you a story that happened to my dad many, many years ago. Sometimes we do things out of instinct that can cause things that hurt us, right? So my dad was brazing in some copper suction lines on a refrigeration system many, many years ago. I remember this was when I first started working with him. And he was brazing in a vertical copper line, and he didn't have it supported. And so he was, working with his torch on the top, and the copper line dropped because there was no support underneath it. Because of the expansion of the lines and stuff, it dropped. And out of instinct, it was a vertical pipe. When it dropped, he grabbed it with his other hand. And that was the pipe that he was just brazing on. So he burnt the whole inside of his hand all onto his wrist right here, really, really bad, to where he still had to work, but he had really bad burns. And it was something out of instinct that happened to him, because the pipe dropped, and instinctually you're just like, whoosh, grab it, don't let it fall. But he was just brazing on it. Okay. So it's so important to learn how not to react when certain things happen. Say you're in a weird, precarious situation and you're brazing something, and it burns you. Don't just drop your torch while it's still lit and run away because your arm hurts. Now something's on fire and it's burning and all this stuff. So you have to learn how to expect the worst and how not to react. That way you don't hurt yourself even more. So keep that in mind, guys. Let me get to the chat. I know there's probably a lot of stuff going on in there. Israel's Curtin says, I need some Just for Men. Nah, man, I embrace the gray. I've talked to my wife about that. I got gray going on over here. I even got gray going on in my head. It's still kind of brown, but I got gray hairs sticking out and everything. But I embrace the gray, guys. I'm not worried about it. I mean, it's not my thing. It doesn't bother me that I'm gray. Now my headphones are all jacked up. It doesn't bother me at all that I'm gray. It's just whatever. It's just never something that's really bothered me. I think it's funny when, some people take shoe polish and, make their beard all super jet black. And it's like, what are you, 12? It's just like, whew, it's all black, and it's just not my style. Whatever. Let me see what else we got going on in here. Can you fix an old R12 system? Sure. You can still get R12. You just want to pay some money for it. You can definitely do it, though. Some people choose to fix that stuff for sure. Let me check my email right now. I'm getting a bunch of emails. Okay, cool. Nothing bad. Let's see what else we got going on in here. Were I on call? Was I on call this weekend? Yes, I did. Let me see what else. Or yes, I was. Have I destroyed too many compressors with liquid refrigerant? No, I've never destroyed a single compressor with liquid refrigerant. We've had a lot of hype about that. Modern compressors, especially scroll compressors, actually can take a lot of liquid refrigerant. Not that it's a good thing. You don't want to test them. And even most modern reciprocating compressors actually have, especially the hermetically sealed ones, they actually have pretty much accumulators built into the inside of the compressor. So it's almost impossible to kill modern hermetically sealed reciprocating compressors and or scroll compressors. You still can. I'm not, you know, don't assume that you can't. You can still damage them, but they usually have some protections built into them to protect against liquid floodback for sure. So how's the man bun coming along? My daughter is super excited about the man bun, Steven. My daughter, every night she comes in, this is my youngest daughter, like her bedtime routine is she walks into my room and she rubs my head and she says, "Good night, Daddy," and gives me a hug. And she always tries to like put my hair up in a ponytail. So she's like, "Dad, it's getting longer." Like she's all excited to be able to put my hair in a ponytail. I told her I'll grow a man bun and I'll let her put it on there. I'll be a full-on millennial with a man bun. I'll definitely do it. All right, let's see what else we got going on in here. Do I work on CO2 racks? No, I do not work on CO2 racks, man. Let's see. Okay, I already answered that one. All right, cool. I'm going to get to my list of things. What would happen if you run a compressor with nitrogen in the system? Well, the refrigerant compressor is not set up properly to push nitrogen through the system. So nitrogen would be a non-condensable refrigerant in that system. So if you had nitrogen mixed in with refrigerant, you would have improper and erratic pressures. You would definitely cause issues with it. Okay, the compressor is not meant to pump nitrogen like that, and the refrigerant temperature relationship wouldn't happen properly. It just wouldn't be good. So how do I deal with an oil logged evaporator? Symptoms, please. Oil logged evaporators are like unicorns. They are very difficult to find. They are very difficult to diagnose. I think a lot of people diagnose oil logged evaporators when they're not necessarily oil logged evaporators. What's the solution for them? I've heard of a bunch of different methods to try to fix an oil logged evaporator. The only tried and true method I know to eliminate oil from an oil logged evaporator is fix the reason that the evaporator started filling up with oil in the first place, typically because of improperly piped refrigeration lines. Once you properly pipe it, if your compressor hasn't already failed, then that oil theoretically should make its way back up to the compressor. But refrigeration line sizing is critical, and you need to make sure that you size liquid and suction lines appropriately and also have proper P-traps and proper risers to make sure that the oil makes its way back up to the compressor, okay? So one of the failures that you will see with an oil logged evaporator is a compressor failure. After compressor failure, after compressor failure, after compressor failure, because everybody will keep putting in a compressor and not figuring out where the oil is going. And eventually that oil will make its way back up to a perfectly operating compressor, and it will flood out the compressor with an over logging the compressor with oil. So it's like a vicious circle. So if you have a compressor that you are replacing, best practice is once you pull that compressor out, go get a pan, pour it out, and see how much oil is in it. If there's no oil in that compressor, that new compressor is on its way out already too, unless you solve the oil problem. You got to figure out where that oil's stuck, and you got to figure out the issue, because the new compressor's oil's just going to make its way down to the evaporator and get stuck too. So as far as what are the symptoms of an oil logged evaporator, it's really, really hard. I think I have one video where I diagnosed a system as an oil logged evaporator. Ironically, that system is still running to this day. It just has a slight restriction in the evaporator, and the customer hasn't had me fix it yet. So it's still maintaining temperatures and working for them, but I imagine in a heavy load, it probably won't work very well. Feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. We can talk a little bit more about it, but finding oil logged evaporators is a really, really difficult thing to do. Diagnosing them and solving them can be very difficult. So the best way I have to remove the oil from the evaporator is figure out the piping issue that caused it, fix that, and let the system fix itself. Let the oil make its way back to the compressor if the compressor hasn't already failed. Let me see what else we got going on in here. 407 condensers. What do I think? I mean, 407C, 404A, R22, they're all different flavors. They're all refrigerants. Our job is to work and know how the refrigerants work. If we have a pressure temperature chart right here, they're all the same, man. They just have different flavors of refrigerants. I'm not so concerned about different refrigerants. We have so many different refrigerants on the market, and guess what? Tomorrow, there's more coming. And the next day, there's more coming. So don't focus on a type of refrigerant, okay? Focus on how refrigerant works in a system and pressure temperature relationships, and your life's going to be a lot easier. Now, what do I think about 407C condensers? I mean, it's just a compressor. It's just a condensing unit. You can use 407C, you can use R22, whatever it may be. On a side note, I just had a customer, actually one of my major customers, I just contacted him. I usually do it once a year and just said, hey, you know, with the current situation with R22 refrigerant, it's getting more and more expensive every single day. I said, my opinion on the matter is that we should start changing this equipment. But I said, in the meantime, we have equipment that's still operating with R22. I said, when we have a failure or a refrigerant leak, I prefer using R22 in these systems, okay? But R22 is getting really expensive. So I gave them the option. I said, would you like me to start exploring some alternative refrigerants, 407C, all these different ones? And then the management person that I was dealing in the facilities department was like, okay, what are the complications of using the alternative refrigerants? And I said, okay, here's the steps we have to take. It can be problematic. Here's the problems we can run into, efficiency loss and different things like that. And my customer just basically said, you know what, man? Whatever you think is best, let's just stick with R22. So I got the green light from my customer to keep using R22 every single day. He knows. I told him, I said, we were doing a job and I said, the difference if I used an alternative to if I used R22 is going to change the price of this job by about $1,500. And he said, that's fine. Just keep using R22 because it's easier until they replace the equipment. So my customers still want me to use R22. I'm all for it. All right. Zet had emailed me about talking to me about how he doesn't even do HVAC, but yet he watches my videos, and he was talking about how the proper practices and the ways that I deal with my customers can relate to so many different industries. And there's truth in that statement, Zet. You know, common sense isn't so common anymore, right? You know, there's a lack of common sense everywhere, but common sense tells you to look at something and think and say, okay, how does this logically work and how can we fix it? Using common sense can apply to any industry, whether you're an electrician, plumber, computer technician, printer repairman, you know, whatever you do, just basic common sense goes a long way. Respect and integrity go a long way too. So, hey, I'm just a service technician. I don't see myself as anything different than anybody else. I'm just a dude that happens to have a platform and people that want to come watch me on Monday nights just babble, okay? But I try to still go out every single day and treat my customers with respect and use integrity and be honest and be fair with my customers. If I screw something up, I'm going to own up to it. And I'm going to tell my customer, this one's on me. I screwed it up, you know, because I want them to keep calling me back. And the same thing goes for any industry. You treat your customers right, you be honest, and you do a good service for them, right? And in a perfect world, they're going to call you back tomorrow to fix whatever else is broken the next day. So treat your customers with respect. That's my business practice. That's my business motto. Now, knock on wood, you know, I am probably not the best person to be preaching about business processes and different things like that. We don't advertise. We've never advertised. The only reason why I have my name on my van is because a particular customer required my name on my van because I was on their property. And honestly, I don't even work for that customer anymore. So why do I still drive around with my name on my van? The only other issue about keeping my name on my vans, I don't get any good advertisement from it. I usually get people bitching about someone driving too fast or cutting someone off or something like that. So the name on my van has only hurt me, actually. It hasn't benefited me at all. I don't advertise or anything like that. And I'm not trying to brag, but we just do good work and our customers recommend us, or managers that we've worked with for many years moves on to a new location and we go with them, you know? So for us, that's worked well. When I'm working on flare nuts, why do I not use a torque wrench? First and foremost, I was never taught to use a torque wrench coming up in the trade, and I do see a need for torque wrenches. Okay. I learned the hard way. I learned how to properly tighten a flare by over tightening a flare and by under tightening a flare and having to go fix refrigerant leaks because I made a mistake, until I finally got to the point that I realized, hey, this is good right here. It's not too tight to the point that it's going to back itself off, but it's not too loose to where it's going to leak from the point one. I tighten it to the right position, and it's just something that I feel in my calibrated torque wrist in my elbow, or torque wrench in my elbow. Okay. I joke and say click, you know, in a video or something like that. Now, I realize that with 410A refrigerant and the higher pressures that it operates with, that flares are becoming more and more critical in that we tighten them appropriately. So I understand the need for a torque wrench. I just haven't used one myself. To be fair, though, and to be honest, I'm not using flare nuts on 410A systems, okay? I'm only using them on 404, which does run higher pressures, but not quite as high as 410A. So I'm not using the higher pressure refrigerants with the flare nuts, okay? But I am using my arms to go ahead and just tighten it up to where it needs to be. I've learned where it needs to go. Honestly, I kind of want to get a torque wrench just to see where I'm actually tightening things, and if that's correct, I'd like to know compared to a torque wrench. But I haven't found a good torque wrench that doesn't look like a piece of junk. Or, you know, I've even reached out to some torque wrench manufacturers to ask them if they wanted to talk about some of these things, and they haven't reached back to me, so I don't know. But yeah, I just use my hands, and I always have. Not judging anybody that doesn't, though, okay? The 98 DeVille, thank you so much for that super chat. That's much appreciated. Thank you, bud. I really appreciate that, okay? Let me see what else we got going on in here. What am I missing? Is replacing dryers, etc. problematic with Zoom Lock? Do you need to cut out connections? Frank, if you're going to use the Zoom Lock Max press tool with the fittings, you can actually get specific dryers that don't have swaged ends on them that the Zoom Lock Max fittings will go right over. But if you need to change that dryer again, yes, you are going to have to cut out the fitting and put a new fitting there. You cannot take out a Zoom Lock Max dryer unless you're using their push to connect fittings. Now, I have not used those, but they have the Zoom Lock Max push to connect fittings, and they actually have removable. You have to have a special tool, and you can remove it and pull the fitting off and then put it back in. But if you're using the standard Zoom Lock Max tool, you will need to change the fitting. You'll have to cut it back, put a new extension there, then put the dryer on. Hopefully that answers your question for you, bud. What am I missing here? You work as a buyer for a commercial company like yours. You'd buy a ton of parts for restaurant equipment. You'd buy a ton of... Kelly Kyler. I don't know what you're saying there, bud. Feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. We can talk some more. Let me see what else. I already answered that question. Oh, right on. Thank you, Joe T. Thanks so much, man. There is no common sense, only superior sense or nonsense. You love how I interact with my customers. Right on. How am I liking the new Field Piece vacuum pump? So I carry the VPX7, which is the 10 CFM vacuum pump on my truck. It's the lightest vacuum pump that Field Piece has ever made. It's awesome. I have no complaints about it. Some cool things that they did. They moved the oil port on the vacuum pump to the side, so no longer in the rain will it fill up the oil reservoir. But yeah, I mean, it's a great vacuum pump. I actually have two of them, one sitting in my shop for when I do big jobs. When I've done some bigger systems, I'll use two vacuum pumps at the same time. But the Field Piece vacuum pump paired with the True Blue hoses from AccuTools, and you're going to be a king when you're doing your evacuations. They're great. What's the best training for working on mini splits? Manufacturers training. Zach. I mean, individual manufacturers, reach out to them. I mean, I don't really know of any particular mini split training, but you definitely want to reach out to the manufacturers because they're going to all have their own weird things that they do with the control system and the circuit boards and stuff. Vlad asks, do I work on Beacon 2 systems? I work on the QRC systems, which is the quick response controller, which I believe has the same Beacon 2 board, but it doesn't have the communication with the condensing unit. I don't have any actual Beacon 2 systems. If you guys don't know, Heatcraft is a major manufacturer of refrigeration components. They have a proprietary control system called Beacon. Beacon 2 is the newest iteration. Well, actually, I believe what's the Intelligent is replacing everything, but Beacon 2 is it's a condensing unit, an evaporator, and then you can couple them together via communication lines, and it just has a different control strategy and more human interface information for the end user to see. You can have communication set up and different alarms set up. It's just a control strategy for the refrigeration system. So let me see. What do I see in here? Do I know if companies like DeWalt or Milwaukee will be coming out with Zoom Lock tools? Well, Milwaukee already has their press tool. DeWalt, I think DeWalt has a press tool. As far as their own fittings, I don't think that they'll come out with their own fittings. There's enough manufacturers out there, but Milwaukee already has a press tool. So, Vlad, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. You're working on a Beacon 2 system right now. Right on, bud. Are the sensors bad? Because on the typical Heatcraft issues, a lot of the times I have bad sensors is what I find. And then you change the sensors and go on your merry way. On an oil log evaporator, can a suction accumulator be a culprit? Well, anything that can restrict the flow of refrigerant can cause the oil to not make its way back to the compressor. I wouldn't necessarily say that a suction accumulator is going to cause an oil log. What actually happens majority of the time is the suction accumulator will actually log itself with oil, because down at the bottom, there's a port typically that has a screen on it to grab the oil and pull the oil from the bottom of the accumulator back. And if people don't use proper refrigeration practices when brazing and working on the system, those screens and the oil and the refrigerant can get filled up with crap, and then that screen will get plugged up. But, you know, of course, if a suction line accumulator is restricted, but I can't see it being restricted. Typically, you'll see the oil just get stuck in the accumulator itself. Keep that in mind. If you ever have a failed compressor, whether it be on a heat pump or a refrigeration system, and there's an accumulator, you need to take that accumulator out and you need to pour it out just like you need to pour the compressor out. If you find a gallon of oil in the accumulator, you got to solve the problem of why it's getting stuck in there. And majority of the time, the pickup screen down at the bottom that's supposed to pick up the oil and take it back will get plugged up. So keep that in mind whenever you're changing failed compressors, is pay close attention to that accumulator for sure. When's the next live service call, Steven? You know, live service calls are actually rather difficult. I've done a few of them, but they only really work if you're on the roof the entire time, because oftentimes to take your phone down to work on the walk-in cooler or walk-in freezer can be difficult. So if I'm doing rooftop work, I might consider doing a live service call, but it's just kind of difficult to do those. You know, in my videos, guys, I don't necessarily show proper practices all the time, but there's some reasons why I don't. Sometimes it's not practical. Sometimes I have to pull an evacuation through my manifold. Sometimes you're not going to see a perfect vacuum because your system was pumped down. I've talked about that a lot. Oftentimes, though, people will ask me, hey, how come you're not wearing a beekeeper suit when you're working on the electrical system? How come you're not wearing, you know, rubber gloves when you're testing components and different things like that? How come you don't have your safety glasses on? How come you don't have this? First and foremost, how come I don't show my lockout tagout procedures and different things like that? First off, I'm not perfect. I'm not a perfect technician. I make mistakes all the time. Second, there's only so much I can show in my videos for liability reasons, okay? When it comes to, like, for instance, I'll get people that email me all the time and say, hey, will you show me how to set up my torches? No, I can't show people how to set their torches up for liability reasons, okay? Because you need to read the proper manuals and figure out how to do that kind of stuff, okay? As far as showing lockout, tagout, I just don't really choose to show that stuff. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, you know. I don't have a beekeeper suit. I don't typically put a beekeeper suit on. If you want to know what I'm talking about, a beekeeper suit it's PPE. It's personal protective equipment. OSHA requirements say that working over certain voltages, you're supposed to have a beekeeper suit. It's a hood with a vest, or with a vest with, you know, face shields and different things like that. Working on certain voltages, you're supposed to have that because of arc flash explosions and different things like that. You know, I don't show everything in my videos all the time. It's not, you know, it's all about just showing the troubleshooting, okay? And while I realize I should be showing proper practices and different things like that, again, I'm not perfect, guys. I'm not, you know. I try my best, but I don't always do that. Who does supermarket work in my area? Oh, there's a lot of different supermarket companies in my area. So too many to name, but I'm not going to really start naming out names. Feel free to send me an email. Am I going to be at the HVACR training symposium, Zach? I have been invited, and I am going to be a guest speaker in person or virtually. I want it to be in person. This is going to be at the Kalos headquarters in Claremont, Florida, next February 2022, I believe. Brian Orr's hosting the HVACR training symposium. So I will be a guest speaker at the symposium. I have not determined whether or not I'm going to be in person or whether I'm going to be doing a virtual presentation. I went to the very first one. I was in person. I really do want to be in person, but I also have to remember that I have AHR, which is going to be at the end of January. And then Brian's event is a couple weeks later in Florida. So I know I'm going to AHR 100% because that one's going to be in Las Vegas. That one's very close to me. And I definitely want to go to the Kalos training or HVACR training symposium too, but it just depends. As we get closer, I'll know a little bit more, but I definitely am going to be a speaker no matter what. So let's see what else we got going on in here. You have a crazy ass PPE suit for your chillers. They are 4160 volts. Yeah. If I was working on something like that, for sure, I would put on a beekeeper suit. Okay. Technically, I think you're supposed to have them for 480 volts too. I always have rooms for improvement. If you guys see things that you think I can improve on, feel free to send me an email. I'm always looking to be educated on things that I need to do better. So feel free to send me an email and let me know if I need to fix something. Okay, guys. Let me see what else we got going on. PPE is important for sure. Yeah, I mean, it protects you and saves your life for sure. Okay. Let's see what else. Do I ever change contactors live? Vlad. No. I'm not going to say I've never done it, but no, that's not something I'm going to do. I'm going to turn the system off. I'm not going to change a contactor live. There's too many things can go wrong there. I can't remember if I've ever done it or not. It wouldn't surprise me if I've done it. But yeah, for sure. What's my tips for dealing with very hot sun? Well, I mean, here's the thing. I work in Southern California. It gets very, very hot here. Okay. The max temperature I've seen on a roof is about 121 degrees. Well, max ambient temperature. I've actually seen hotter because when you get up onto a roof, it's typically anywhere from 10 to 20 degrees hotter on a roof because of the roof materials and the reflective nature of certain roof materials and different things like that, and metal equipment. It can be really hot depending on how big the roof is and things. But ambient temperatures, I've seen about 121 degrees. Let me see. I just saw a super chat come through. Burma Canyon, thank you so very much for that super chat, man. That's awesome. That's much appreciated. Okay. So as far as things to do, first off, I live in Southern California and work in Southern California. We do not know what humidity is here. On average, during our hottest times during the summer, the humidity will be like 25%. During monsoonal moisture season, right? We get monsoonal moisture through the summertime. Thunderstorms will typically start in New Mexico, Arizona, and come into Southern California. Our humidity levels will rise and we lose our minds, guys. But when we lose our minds, it's about 45-50% humidity. Okay. So with that being said, I realize that there's other places that have ridiculous humidity. Okay. We don't know what humidity is here, but with that being said, I wear long sleeve shirts all day long. I wear long sleeve Dickies shirt. I have an undershirt. It's a black Under Armour shirt that I wear underneath my shirt every day. I wear a sun hat. I wear a neck visor or neck thing to protect my neck. And I wear long black pants every single day. That actually keeps me cool in the summertime. But a lot of that has to do with the no humidity. Okay. I sweat inside my shirt, but it keeps the sun off my skin. That's the biggest thing that I'm trying to do, is reduce my sun exposure because I'm mortified of skin cancer. So, I used to have a really bad farmer's tan. I don't really have I kind of have a little bit of a farmer's tan, but it's really just from wearing shirts on my personal time because I never wear short sleeves at work anymore. I've worn long sleeves at work now for years, but it used to be that I would have a farmer's tan that I could never get rid of because I'd be out in the sun all day long with my work shirts, you know, and I had short sleeve at the time. Let me see what else we got going on in here. Have I had any problems with customers not wanting to pay me? Yeah, it's very, very rare. We've had a few of them, nothing crazy notable. I've talked about a few of them, you know, in the past, but nothing really notable. We have very good customers and we typically don't let it get to a situation. You can usually see that stuff coming if you have a good customer that you deal with regularly and you start to know that pay issues are starting to happen. You start to see them getting backed up and you just stop work and you just tell them, I'm not going to do any more service work for you until you get paid up, you know? But I've luckily crossed my fingers. They've all ended up paying for the most part. Let's see. Let me see what I saw in here. Yeah, if I don't see something that you guys are typing, definitely put it in caps lock, okay? I see comments from people saying retype it so Chris can see it, but I don't see those because it's really hard. I don't stare at the chat the entire time. So if I'm missing something, feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com, okay? Let me see. Where is Coke Nose at? Coke Nose is not really there today unless you said something and now it starts to itch. All right, so I want to talk about fire interlock systems. So in my recent video about the exhaust fans not working, it was a fire interlock that was kind of confusing me, okay? Why do we have a fire interlock into our exhaust fan systems? Well, it's simply because, you know, the exhaust fans are there to pull combustible gases and combustible byproducts out of the air so that way the kitchen staff doesn't have to breathe them. Now, they also pull a little bit of heat out of the air and smoke out of the air too, okay? With that being said, you know, typically they install some type of an interlock device that makes sure that you are not turning the cooking appliances on until the exhaust fans are fully running. There's a couple different methods that you can do that. In my situation, they had a very peculiar method in that they had a contactor for every cooking appliance in the kitchen, and every contactor was powered by the 24-volt source that the hood gets its power for, right? So the 24-volt transformer inside the makeup air unit had lost a fuse. The fuse failed. I'm thinking because of a lightning storm. And that caused every cooking appliance and every exhaust fan in the building to go down. All right. It's important that, you know, while I didn't know exactly what was going on until after I found the fuse and then kind of looked at it some more, I had a general idea of how interlock systems work. And you know why they do it. And with that being said, you always have it in the back of your mind. Now, the way that they had the interlock set up on this system was a little bit different than what I normally see. So that's why it surprised me how I found it. You guys really started the whole Coke Nose thing because now it's itching like crazy. But understanding and having a general understanding of these exhaust systems will definitely help you. So that way you're not completely lost when you're trying to, you know, diagnose this stuff. You know, I don't know everything about everything I'm working on every single day, but I have a general idea of how things typically work. And that usually gets me in the ballpark to say, oh, this is a little bit different. They're doing this, or, oh, this is what they're doing. Okay. But it's important that, you know, I think it's important the way that I run things. I don't send a technician that I don't think can fix one of these problems out to do it. If I know something funky is going on, either myself will go out or I'll send a technician that I have confidence has a general idea that's going on. You know, if I find something weird, that's why I started making these videos, because my thought was, hey, I can't have my guys with me every single day, but they need to see this weird thing we ran into. And you know what? I'm going to start filming it so that way we can talk about it after. And we have discussions about this kind of stuff. This morning, at our morning meeting that we had this morning, we all talked for a half an hour about that interlock and how that fuse caused everything to fail. And as I was explaining it to them, they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense, you know, and yeah, you know. So I make these videos for them so that way they can see that kind of stuff, okay? When it comes to changing motors and bearings and ACs and evaporator coils, what do I do with all the old parts? Someone had asked me, actually a bunch of people ask me that all the time. I've talked about this a few times. If I'm doing AC installs, I usually let my delivery driver take the AC units because he disposes of them for me. So we'll recover the refrigerant out of them, and then he goes, he'll bring me the AC units that we're installing, and then he'll take the old ones and dispose of them. Now he scraps them and makes money off of them. But for me to take those units back to my shop, pay someone to go and scrap them, take them apart, I'm going to break even, if not lose money, by the time I pay a technician to tear down that unit. And I don't have the time as it is. I mean, I do save some copper. Sometimes I save evaporator coils, and I'll go spend a Saturday up at the office, 8 hours, just cutting things up and sorting and, you know, and then taking it to the scrapyard. But if you think about it, I have to pay a technician to do all that kind of stuff. So most of the time it's not very practical. Now, the rule that we have with our company is my technicians are allowed to scrap copper. I don't care if they do. But if we go to a job, the lead on that job gets to choose if he wants the scrap or not. And if he doesn't want it, then he passes it on to the next person. So whoever is the lead on that job always gets first priority on any scrap metals. Now, as far as an AC unit, like a package unit, I always give that to the delivery driver because he delivers to me for free. Therefore, I give him the units and he takes those and makes money off of those. So that's our agreement. Okay. But when it comes to evaporator coils, we're changing walk-in coils and stuff like that. If I'm working on the job, sometimes I'll take it. You know, maybe I want to make a video about it. Maybe I want to scrap it for myself. Majority of the time, I'll just ask my technicians, hey, last time you got to take this, I'm going to give it to the other guy this time. You know, I'll just let them take it as they wish, but it really depends on who the lead is on the job. Then I let them be the one to choose who's going to take the scrap equipment away. As far as my videos go, guys, why is it that I don't use proper terminology every single time in my videos? Why do I sometimes refer to parts as a chingus or as this or that? Guys, I'm not making this whole video thing. It turned into something bigger than I ever expected it to turn into. Okay. I don't have a grand plan for HVACR videos. I'm just having fun with it, riding it out. It is what it is. That's the way I treat it. Not judging anybody else that focuses really hard upon their social media platforms. I don't focus very hard. I do not try very hard with this. With that being said, when I make a video, it's me. It's not me rehearsed. I'm not reading a script. I don't know proper terminology for everything because I'm just a normal service technician that happens to talk to himself. Therefore, I turn on a camera and it's no different. I rationalize with myself. I troubleshoot. If I don't have my phone filming, I sound like a crazy person. Actually, having a phone makes it seem a little bit more normal than I'm actually talking to myself because the way that I troubleshoot is talking to myself anyways, right? So I'm not a perfect technician. I don't have things rehearsed and scripted. You know, I just kind of say it like it is. And if I can't think of a word, I think of a silly word to call it, a chingus or hey, look at this little guy right here, or, you know, this, whatever. Because I don't plan on turning this into a giant social media empire. Now, maybe that'll happen, but I don't plan on it. I'm just having fun with this and riding it out like it is. I don't ever want these videos to become a job that is miserable. And there's times that it kind of gets that way. There's times that it's like, oh my gosh, 2 videos a week. I don't want to make a video this week. I just want to go to sleep or whatever. So I try not to let it get out of control to where it's miserable for me, okay? And with that being said, I got to have fun with it. I got to be able to be myself and express myself. So I'm not going to get crazy technical and be always perfect. I'm just a normal service tech. Ever thought about teaching? Vlad. Yes, I have thought about teaching, but I'm going to be completely honest with you. There's not enough money in teaching. I don't need to be a millionaire, but I need to make a good living. And I have a lot of frustration with higher education, whether it be private schools or public community colleges and stuff like that. They don't pay their teachers enough. And it's ludicrous to think that an HVAC teacher can teach an introduction to air conditioning and refrigeration class, just an introduction class. Within 6 months to a year, the person that they're teaching is going to make more money potentially than that teacher is making. That's baloney. That should not happen. Okay. Now, I also realize that there's some horrible teachers out there that shouldn't be teaching. That's fair. But to think that within 6 months to a year of finishing an HVAC program or even just starting an HVAC program, most of the time, the service technician that's still going to school is going to be making more money than the person teaching them. That's not right. That's silly. So I have no interest in teaching for that reason. It would just irritate me to know that I'm getting paid pennies for what I'm teaching these kids. I love teaching. It's a fun thing to do, but it's frustrating to know that you're not going to make very much money at all. And and this is why I would never be hired as a teacher, because if I was to be hired as a teacher, I have to have full control of whether or not a student fails my class or doesn't fail it. And I'm going to tell you right now, a good majority, not all of them, but a good majority of the for-profit private trade schools out there will punish teachers for flunking students, because to the school, a student is just a paycheck. This isn't all of them, but this is a large majority of them. That student is money. So whether or not they fail the class, it's not about necessarily educating the student versus just making the money from the student. That's a for-profit college issue. Not all of them, but a good majority of them think like that. And that wouldn't fly with me, because I actually have a friend of mine that went to work for a for-profit school, and one of the reasons he left that was because he kept getting in trouble because he was being real and saying, look, you're not cutting it. You need to bounce. You need to get out of my program because you're not going to make it. And he got in trouble for doing that because the person clearly was there just on, government money, and that frustrates me. I couldn't deal with that kind of stuff. So you guys started me on a rant with that one. Let me see. What am I missing in here? Average trade teachers here make $55K a year, which is good money in this area. Hamilton, $55K a year is not good money in Southern California. You can't. That's not good money for a teacher. No. When a service technician, if that service technician goes to a residential company and becomes a salesman, that service technician's likely going to be making over $100,000 a year. If you're an experienced refrigeration service technician doing light commercial refrigeration, you're going to make, and if you're a good tech, you're going to make 80,000 plus, pushing 100,000 a year, easy. Okay. So no, that's not enough to go through a program to be making that much. That's not going to happen. Let's see. What do we have going on in here? Okay. I'm looking at the chat now. I'm going to go ahead and get into here. So Glenn had brought up a good point, in my YouTube comments, that he thinks that all compressors, doesn't matter what size it is, all compressors should have an oil sight glass and an oil fill port. And I wholeheartedly agree with Glenn. It's just ridiculous to think that we have to take a compressor out of the system, pour the oil out, measure it to find out if there's enough oil in that compressor. That's pretty ridiculous. It doesn't seem like it'd be that difficult to add a sight glass and an oil fill port on every single compressor out there. And I think all manufacturers should start doing that, because we could eliminate some serious headaches when it comes to wondering whether or not that compressor has the right amount of oil in it if we just simply had a sight glass. Now, bigger scroll compressors, bigger hermetic compressors, they all have sight glasses, but some of the smaller stuff, they don't. And that's frustrating. I'll mark that one off the list. When I'm dealing with refrigerants, in my walk-in cooler video, someone had asked me, a few people actually asked me, why didn't I change all the refrigerant? If the refrigerant that I was using was 404A and it's a blend, since some of it leaked out, what are the odds that it's not going to have the same pressure temperature relationship? I'm going to be honest with you, with 404A, it's a near azeotropic blend, meaning that the glide is very minimal on 404A. So it's not very common. If I leaked out maybe more than half to 3/4 of the charge, I might consider changing all the refrigerant. But if I just leaked out a couple pounds, I'm just going to top it off. I'm going to repair it and top it off. I personally haven't had any issues when it comes to 404A. When it comes to some of the bigger refrigerants that have high glides, you might need to be a little bit concerned in that. But even with 448A, I've heard from manufacturers that it's not really a big issue topping off the charge on those two. So I personally haven't had bad experiences with it, so I continue to top off the charge. It just isn't really an issue for me. I already answered that one. So Ben had asked me a question. Why am I hating, or why do people in general hate on the UEI meters so much? Because in my recent video, I made a point to say, this is not my UEI meter, this is my apprentice's. The reason why I made that point in that video, I don't hate the UEI meters. They work fine, okay? I am very used to, and have always used, or at least for the last few years, use my field piece meter. I'm used to the buttons. I'm used to where everything is. My apprentice has a UEI meter. Nothing wrong with it. It works fine. When it comes time to using it, I have to think and stare at it for a minute, and it's not like muscle memory switching the meter over to the different settings. So that's the only reason why I bring that up. I'm just accustomed and used to my field piece meters. So I use the field piece SC480. That's my go-to meter, and I love it. I'm comfortable with it. Nothing against the UEIs. I know a lot of people love the UEI meters, so I don't hate on them. It's just not something that I use very often. So I make a point to try to address some of the comments in my videos in the closing words, or I pointed it out in that video like, hey, This is happening because, you know, or I'm using this meter because it's my apprentice's, just because I knew everybody was going to say, what happened to the field piece meter? You know, I just address it to try to eliminate some of the questions is all. I did have a good question from someone, and the question was, why in the heck do I take so much abuse from these restaurants? Why do I let them frustrate me? Aren't I the service technician? Don't the restaurants need me? Yes, they do, but that's not how I run my business. I run my business respecting my customers and treating my customers like they're my family. So while it's frustrating that I have to get an overtime service call, I'm not going to yell at them because I want them to keep calling me. You know, I want to treat them like a good person. I want to be a good business person. Now, it's inherent that we're going to get issues. It's inherent that they're going to make nuisance service calls that are going to frustrate me. That's just going to happen. That's part of the business. Okay. So why do I let them frustrate me? Because I'm human. I have issues. I have mental issues. I have anger problems and different things like that. You guys see my anger probably coming out in my videos. It happens. I try to deal with it. I have a handle on it. But it's never going to go away. I'm diagnosed with all kinds of crazy stuff, and I went through treatment for anger issues and different things like that. And the conclusion of all the help that I sought and the therapy that I went through is that I'm going to have these issues for the rest of my life. It's just a matter of how I choose to deal with them. So, you know, if I vent some frustrations on a video to you guys, that's one way of dealing with it. I'm certainly not going to vent those frustrations to the customer in the way that I might tell it to you guys, because that's not appropriate, right? This is like an outlet for me. This is a way for me to communicate. So I take it, right? So I'm always going to try to treat my customers with respect, right? Let me see what else we got going on here. What invoice software do I use? The invoicing software that I use is called Intuit Field Service Management. I've used it for, I swear, over 10 years now. So let's see what else we got going on. What am I missing in here? What can I tell and diagnose from a burnt refrigerant smell? Burnt refrigerant is not normal. It's a common indication of acids in the system. If a system does have an acid burnout, or if the refrigerant has turned into an acid because of the burnout, there's a distinct smell to it. So one thing you know, if you have burnt refrigerant, the refrigerant needs to be changed. And typically it's because of an electrical explosion in a sense, right? An electrical short inside the compressor that caused that refrigerant to burn or the oil to burn or something. So you don't know for sure if it's acid contamination unless you properly test it, but it's pretty safe to say that if I have a burnt out compressor, I just had one recently. I don't think I made a video on it yet, but had a burnout compressor and I smelt the oil or smelt the refrigerant. It smells really bad. If you smell burnt refrigerant, you'll never forget that smell. You just take a tiny, just spray a little bit with your finger, depress the Schrader, then smell your finger. And you'll be like, whoa, what is that? That will never go away. You'll never forget that smell. And that's typically an indication of an issue. So they're going to get new compressor, new oil, burnout dryers. So spoiling HH, liquid line and suction line cores. The HH is a high wax removal. And then they're going to get nitrogen purge through the system. And we're going to try to figure out what caused it after we get all that stuff fixed. All right, let's see what else. Whatever happened to the 06D compressor? The thing was a tank. Yeah, 06Ds were very common. They would come in carrier 10-ton split systems, 12-ton package units. They would be in Vote ice machines. You'd see those all over the place. You'd see them on the supermarket side, but they realized that they weren't as efficient in some of the smaller equipment as a scroll compressor could be. They'd eliminate the 06D compressors because they had unloaders and it was, you know, kind of complicated. They'd put in 2 scroll compressors and you know, it'd weigh less, it'd be more efficient. There's good things and bad things about them. But the 06Ds did last forever. It's just ever having to change an 06D on a Vote ice machine. My gosh. Think about changing an 06D on a Vote ice machine. Those things were tanks. If any of you guys have ever worked on the Votes with the old 06D semi-hermetic compressors in them, those things were a joke, man. To get them in that thing and get them piped in properly, ugh, what a nightmare. I only had to change one of those in my life, and I was just helping on it, and it was a nightmare. What was the worst burnout I've seen? I can't think of the worst. I don't know what that is. Bedtime, early start tomorrow. Have a good night. Jason Johnson, thanks for coming in, bud. I really appreciate you, man. You're always awesome. Thank you. You used to work on them on containers, right on, yeah. Those things were big, big boys. All right. If I missed any questions, definitely throw them in the chat right now because I ran out of things to talk about, so I'll address the chat for a few minutes here. Can I explain why I can't measure subcooling with the receiver system? No, I don't think I can quite explain that one right here to make it make sense and get all technical with it. It's a rather difficult process to explain. There's some voodoo magic happening in the system, so it's not really something I can explain on the stream right now. Let me see what else we got going on in here. What am I missing? Let's see if I missed anything up in the top. Do I work with semi-hermetic K-body compressors? Yeah, I still have a few of them out there, Vlad, just not as many anymore. I already answered that question. I'm just kind of going up into here, seeing what I missed. What can I tell? I already answered that one. What's the Chinggis count? I don't know. You guys tell me. How many times did I say it? Analog or digital gauges? I actually like the digitals. I understand how to use an analog. I think it's important for people to understand how to use analog, but there's a really good argument for digital gauges. You can see a lot of things that you can't see with analog gauges, but there's some faults in digital too. I'm going to tell you right now, if you ever need to set a pressure control, you're better off using analog gauges than digitals because the refresh time on a digital gauge set is a little difficult. So, H.E. Shalongo, you said you would love private chat. Feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. So that's the best way to get a hold of me. I don't have a private chat set up. What am I missing on here? What is my favorite hobby? I don't get to do it very often, but I love camping and hiking. Backpacking, that is my favorite thing to do. But I will say, guys, I'm super excited about this. I don't know if I've said this on the stream yet. So I used to have a black Labrador retriever. Her name was Ava. She was 12 years old. We had to put her to sleep about 2 years ago. It was really a bummer. You watch some of my original videos, you'd see her sleeping back in here because she would be in here. I think my camera was set up on this wall, and she used to sleep on the floor during my live streams. But her and I, we used to go on hiking trips together. She had her own backpack that she would carry. We had a lot of fun. We'd go overnight trips and different things like that. And we had to put her down. She lived a good life and everything, but you know, it was time, and I needed some time to heal from that. Well, we've reached the 2-year mark, and actually am gonna pick up a new puppy. It's gonna be a silver lab. Next, in about a week, we get to pick him up. His little boy, his name's gonna be Luke. He's gonna be a big boy. I think his dad was 75 pounds, and I think his dad might have been 80 pounds, and his mom was 70 pounds. So he's going to be a big boy. He was the second biggest in his litter, and we get to pick him up. So I'm super excited about that because now I'm going to get to go hiking and camping again with my dog. So this is going to be fun. That's one of my favorite things to do. I don't get to do it very often anymore. I've even gotten to take my family on some of those trips. I've taken my daughters and my wife several different times on some backpacking trips. Of course, they don't enjoy it quite as much as I do because I love just being out in the middle of nowhere. There was one time, we're at the end of the stream, I can tell this story, but there was one time that myself and my dog Ava went on a backpacking trip, and I had planned it, but I didn't get off work until really, really late. So we didn't get to the trailhead until midnight. So it was pitch black outside. We were hiking. I had a flashlight, a headlight mounted to my dog's backpack. I had little lights on there pointing so that way she can see where she was going. And then I had a headlight on mine. And we were hiking down to this campground that was about 3 miles out in the middle of the night. And we got lost in the middle of the night. I mean, when I say we got lost, I knew where I was. I was in the San Bernardino National Forest. You can't really get that lost in the San Bernardino National Forest. It's not that big. But I mean, I knew where I was, but we just lost the trail. We couldn't find it. It was pitch black. It was really hard. We had to sleep on a mountain ridge, and I had brought a hammock and a tent. So I brought my hammock. I got the hammock all set up on the ridge, and we were hiking. It was miserable sleep that night, but it was one of the best camping trips I ever had just from the experience and the fun that we had on the trip. So we set up the camp or the hammock. I got in it. I got my dog. My dog weighed about 70 pounds. Got her on my chest. She was breathing in my face the whole night, you know, just like horrible breath, and I'm miserable. It was cold outside. We're sleeping on the mountain. I kind of might have fell asleep for a few minutes, and then somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up laying on the ground. The hammock slid down the tree, and we just laid there. I was like, you know what? All the trouble I went to get the dog on top of me sleeping, I wasn't going to go through it again. So I just slept like halfway on the ground, the most miserable night of sleep, but it's one of the most memorable trips that I ever had. Just me and my dog having fun, camping out in the middle of nowhere, getting lost. That's just fun to me. You know, taking what you have on your back and just disappearing for a weekend is an awesome thing. I really love the outdoors. I love being out in the wilderness, and I look forward to that with my new dog coming up soon. So I'm super stoked about that. Let's see what else. Let me see. What am I missing in here? Puppies are awesome. Yeah. Oh, interesting, JJ. You just got a miniature schnauzer. So my dad had 2 of the miniature schnauzers growing up. We had 2 of them. They're great dogs. They bark a lot, but they're great dogs. They're beautiful. They're fun. They're very loving. Schnauzers are awesome. They're very playful too. So what are the ingredients for my peach cobbler, Danny? I had made a peach cobbler on a family camping trip. I don't remember, man. It was super easy though. I'll have to find that recipe, but I made it in a cast iron Dutch oven. Just put it in there. It was like cake mix, can of peach, or like 2 cans of peaches. It wasn't anything fancy because it was camping. You know, it was just cake batter, a couple cans of peaches, and then just let it simmer with a lot of butter in it and let it simmer for an hour or something like that. It was a long time, but it was really good. Let me see what else we got. What kind of dog do I have, and how often do I go camping and hiking? Taz, I don't get to go as often, but I'm about to pick up a new puppy in about a week and a half. It's going to be a Labrador Retriever. It's a silver lab. So I'm super stoked. The previous dog that I had, I haven't been backpacking since. So it's been at least 2 years, because when I put my dog down 2 years ago, it was probably 6 months prior to that. I took her on her last trip, and I knew it was her last trip because I was having to lift her over obstacles. She wasn't able to run over them. So I just kind of knew it was coming, you know? And, but yeah, she was a black lab, was my previous dog. So I had a 2-year break to kind of heal because she was 12 years old and she was my best friend. So it took a long time to get over that. And now it's time. So we're moving on, and got a new dog coming, and I look forward to all the adventures we get to have with him. My wife is super stoked because this last year we got paddle boards, and my wife really likes doing the paddleboard thing. So she's super excited to be able to take the dog out on the paddle boards and get him a life jacket. And like, we're going to have so much fun with this. So it's going to be awesome. Let's see what kind of, okay, so I already answered that one. Yeah, 150-pound dog requires a shovel to clean up after. Yeah, I'm not getting that quite. So let me see what else. What else do we got going on in here? How many cats do I have? Jesus, I don't have any cats. My wife and my daughters have 2 cats, and I hate them. One of them I can tolerate, but the other one and I do not get along. It is annoying, and I hate that cat. Yeah. All right. Right on. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, everybody. This has been awesome. You guys have been amazing. I really appreciate all your support. If I missed any of your guys' questions, feel free to send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. You guys are awesome. I can't say this enough. It's so humbling, all the support I get from all of you guys. It's very cool. I'm going to cue up the outro music. I really appreciate you. We will catch you guys on the next one. There's still 147 of you here, and the show is over. What is going on? You guys need to go home. I'm telling you, I don't have anything else to give you. I have a tape measure, but I'm not going to give it away. I don't have anything. I don't have anything for you. I've got nothing else to give. My voice hurts from talking so much. I've covered everything on my list. I've got nothing else for you guys. You need to hit the X at the top of your screen and make it go away. It's got to go. You guys got to wrap this up. You need to bounce. I got nothing else to give you guys. I don't know why you're still here. It doesn't make sense to me. You just need to leave. So move on. Just tap it in. Just tap-tap-a-roo. Just go to your home. That's all you got to do. Just go to your home. Are you too good for your home? I don't understand. You just need to go to your home. You need to go. I got nothing else. Still 144 of you guys in here. I don't get it. I just don't get it. All right. I'm out for good. Thanks again. We'll catch you on the next one.